What happens when an alpha's vengeance blinds him to the truth right in front of him? He thought he was claiming a weak, worthless omega just to spite the woman who shattered his pride. But with one vicious, unthinking bite, he didn't break her. He unleashed a god. The sprawling Lockwood estate, nestled deep in the shadow of the Oregon Cascades, was ablaze with crystal chandeliers and the intoxicating scent of expensive champagne. It was the night of the Blood Moon Gala, a centuries-old tradition for the Silver Pine Pack. For the outside world, it was an exclusive high-society gathering of billionaire investors and tech moguls. For the pack, it was a political battlefield. Alpha Kit Lockwood stood at the top of the grand, sweeping staircase, his tailored tuxedo doing little to hide the rigid, coiled tension of his broad shoulders. At 28, Kit was a ruthless businessman and an even more merciless alpha. Tonight was supposed to be his triumph. Tonight, before the stroke of midnight, he was legally and spiritually obligated by the pack elders to claim his chosen mate, cementing his absolute authority over the territory. His eyes, a piercing shade of amber, scanned the crowded ballroom until they locked onto her, Sienna Frost. Sienna was the daughter of the wealthiest beta lineage in the Pacific Northwest. She was striking, draped in a backless emerald gown that clung to her curves, her platinum blonde hair cascading like liquid silver. They had been in an arranged courtship for 6 months. It was a strategic alliance, devoid of true mate pull, but Kit was a man of duty, not romance. But as Kit descended the stairs, ready to call for the ceremonial silence, the scent in the room shifted. A foul, metallic tang of betrayal cut through the expensive perfumes. Kit watched, frozen, as Sienna stepped to the center of the ballroom. She didn't look up at him. Instead, she reached out her perfectly manicured hand to another man. Reese Sterling, alpha of the rival Blackwood pack. A collective gasp echoed through the cavernous hall. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing. Kit. Sienna's voice rang out, amplified by the sudden, suffocating silence. Her tone was laced with a sickly, sweet pity that made Kit's blood boil. I'm sorry, but a Luna must follow her wolf, and my wolf does not bow to the silver pine. She bows to the Blackwood. To prove her point, Sienna tilted her head, exposing her long neck. Reese, a smug, aristocratic smirk playing on his lips, leaned down and pressed a deep, possessive kiss against her scent gland. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a public execution of Kit's pride. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Elder Harrison, a stoic man with a cane of polished mahogany, slammed it against the marble floor. Alpha Kit, if you do not present a marked Luna by midnight, the ancient laws dictate your younger brother, Caleb, will challenge you for the Alpha command. You are unfit to lead without a mate to anchor your temper. Kit saw red. The humiliation burned in his chest like battery acid. He could feel the eyes of 400 elite werewolves burning into his skin, judging him, pitying him. He looked at Sienna, who was now openly laughing behind her champagne flute with Reese. They had planned this. They wanted to humiliate him into stepping down. I need a mate, Kit's wolf snarled in his mind, thrashing against his ribs in blind rage. Anyone. Now. His amber eyes darted frantically around the room, the rational part of his brain completely hijacked by the feral humiliation of his beast. That was when his gaze landed on a figure cowering near the catering tables, desperately trying to blend into the velvet drapes. Genevieve Lawson. Everyone called her Evie. Evie was 21, an Omega whose family had been stripped of their rank years ago following a territory dispute. She was dressed in a simple, ill-fitting black uniform, holding a silver tray of empty hors d'oeuvre plates. With her messy chestnut hair hastily pinned up and her pale, terrified green eyes, she was the absolute antithesis of Sienna Frost. Evie was small, timid, and practically invisible. She was at the absolute bottom of the pack's hierarchy, a punching bag for the snobbish elite. She was the ultimate insult. If Sienna wanted to show the pack that Kit wasn't worthy of a high-ranking beta, Kit would show Sienna that he didn't care about rank at all. He would mark the lowest, most pathetic creature in the room just to prove his absolute authority. Before anyone could blink, Kit moved. He was a blur of lethal speed. Evie only had time to drop her silver tray. It clattered loudly against the marble before a massive, unyielding hand clamped around her delicate wrist. "Alpha?" Evie whispered, her voice trembling, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kit didn't answer. He dragged her to the exact center of the ballroom, right in front of Sienna and Reese. Evie stumbled, her knees bruising against the stone, weeping in sheer terror as the overwhelming, oppressive aura of the enraged Alpha crushed her lungs. "You want a Luna?" Kit roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, vibrating with a dark, terrifying frequency. He glared right at Sienna. "Here is my Luna." Sienna scoffed, covering her mouth in mock horror. "Kit, have you gone mad? That's the Lawson girl. She's an Omega, a servant. She is mine," Kit thundered. He didn't give Evie a chance to speak. He didn't ask for her consent. Blinded by wrath and the ticking clock of the midnight deadline, Kit grabbed Evie by the waist, hauling her flush against his chest. He shoved her dark hair aside, exposing the vulnerable curve of her neck. Evie squeezed her eyes shut, a sob ripping from her throat. "Please, no." Kit sank his elongated canines deep into her flesh. It wasn't a bite of passion or a gentle claiming between fated mates. It was a branding, a brutal, agonizing tear of flesh driven by pure, unadulterated spite. The pack watched in stunned, horrified silence as the Alpha's blood mixed with the Omega's, sealing a bond born out of nothing but rage. When an Alpha marks a wolf, a powerful exchange of pheromones and spiritual energy occurs, meant to tether their souls. But Kit had bitten down with so much violent dominance that the sheer force of his venom was lethal to a normal Omega. He pulled back, his mouth stained with her blood, chest heaving. He expected Evie to crumple to the floor in absolute whimpering submission, permanently chained to his will. He expected the elders to nod in grim satisfaction that the deadline was met, and he expected Sienna to realize her rejection hadn't broken him. But Evie didn't fall. A terrible, unnatural stillness descended upon the ballroom. The air pressure suddenly dropped, popping the ears of everyone in the room. The extravagant crystal chandeliers above them flickered, buzzing with a strange electrical interference, before dimming entirely. Kit stepped back, his brows knitting together in confusion. "Evie?" he commanded, his Alpha tone laced with compulsion. "Knail." She didn't move. Instead, a low, guttural sound began to emanate from the small woman's chest. It sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates. Evie's hands flew to her neck, covering the bleeding bite mark, but her fingers were trembling not with fear, but with a sudden, overwhelming surge of agonizing heat. Deep within Genevieve Lawson's bloodline was a secret so closely guarded that not even she knew its full truth. Her late mother, Annalise, had not been a disgraced rogue. Annalise had been a descendant of the first Lunas, the original matriarchs of the werewolf species, who possessed powers that rivaled, and often eclipsed, the Alphas. Knowing that the modern, patriarchal pack structures would exploit or kill a female with such godlike power, Annalise had cast a forbidden blood seal on her daughter's wolf, locking it away and forcing Evie into the submissive, scentless role of an Omega. The seal was designed to withstand anything, except the highly volatile, venom-laced bite of a supreme Alpha driven by intense, raw emotion. Kit's venom didn't just enter her bloodstream, it acted as an acidic catalyst. It burned through Annalise's ancient wards like a blowtorch through silk. Crack. The sound was deafening, echoing in the minds of every wolf in the room. It was the sound of a spiritual cage shattering. Evie threw her head back, and a scream tore from her lips, but it wasn't a human scream. It was a resonant, earth-shaking howl that shattered every pane of glass in the eastern wing of the estate. Shards of glass rained down like diamonds, but before they could hit the floor, they froze in midair. "What is happening?" Elder Harrison shouted, clutching his cane as his knees buckled. Kit tried to step forward, to grab his newly marked mate, but an invisible wall of force slammed into his chest, throwing his 200-pound frame backward. He hit a marble pillar, gasping for breath. The Alpha aura he had projected so proudly was instantly suffocated, swallowed whole by a presence so vast and ancient it made him feel like a helpless pup. Evie slowly lowered her hands. The bite mark on her neck was no longer bleeding red. It was glowing with a blinding, luminescent silver light. When she opened her eyes, the terrified, pale green irises of the timid Omega were gone. In their place were pools of liquid, glowing quicksilver. The ambient shadows in the room seemed to physically stretch and bend toward her, wrapping around her simple black uniform like a regal, shifting cloak of darkness. A heavy, crushing gravitational pressure hit the room. It wasn't the aggressive, demanding command of an alpha. It was the absolute, undeniable pull of the moon herself. One by one, the elite wolves of the Silver Pine Pack collapsed to their knees. The billionaire investors, the snobbish socialites, the hardened warriors they couldn't stand. The instinctual need to submit to the overwhelming royalty radiating from Evie was written into their DNA. Sienna Frost, who had been laughing just moments ago, let out a choked gasp as her knees hit the glass-covered floor. She clawed at her own throat, suffocating under the weight of Evie's aura. Beside her, Alpha Reese of the Blackwood Pack, a man who bowed to no one, was forced onto all fours, his face pressed against the cold stone, a whimper escaping his throat. Kit struggled, his muscles bulging, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to fight the compulsion. "She is my mate," his wolf roared, trying to assert dominance. "I marked her!" But as Evie turned her glowing silver gaze upon him, Kit realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that he hadn't claimed her. He had woken her up. Evie took a step forward. The sound of her cheap, scuffed shoe against the marble sounded like a thunderclap in the silent room. She looked down at Kit, who was slowly, agonizingly being forced to his knees against his will. "You marked me in rage, Kit Lockwood," Evie spoke. Her voice was no longer a timid whisper. It was layered, resonant, echoing with the ancient timbre of 1,000 forgotten queens. It vibrated in the marrow of every wolf present. "You sought to use me as a pawn to shield your fragile ego." Kit gritted his teeth, finally forced down onto one knee, looking up at the woman he thought was a worthless servant. "Evie, what are you?" She tilted her head, the silver light from her bite mark pulsing with her heartbeat. A cold, remorseless smile curved her lips. "I am the mistake you will spend the rest of your life regretting," she whispered, the dual-layered voice slicing through the tense air. "You wanted a Luna to save your crown, but I am not here to wear your crown, Kit." Evie raised her hand, and the heavy oak doors of the ballroom blasted off their hinges, revealing the dark, sprawling forest outside, illuminated by the full blood moon. "I am here to take it." The aftermath of the Blood Moon Gala was not a scandal. It was a massacre of the established order. Genevieve Lawson did not run into the night like a frightened prey animal. She walked out of the Lockwood estate with the slow, deliberate grace of a monarch leaving a tainted throne room, and not a single wolf, not even the formidable Alpha Kit, could lift a finger to stop her. For the next 3 weeks, the Silver Pine Pack bled from the inside out. Kit was a man deteriorating. The bond he had violently forced onto Evie was a two-way tether. Because he had marked her in a state of venomous rage, the supernatural link was poisoned. Without her proximity, without her acceptance of the bond, the Alpha's cellular structure began to slowly, agonizingly break down. He spent his days locked in his glass-walled office in downtown Portland, staring out at the Mount Hood National Forest where his trackers said she had disappeared. His corporate empire was faring no better. The humiliation at the gala had shown weakness, and in the world of billionaire shifters, weakness was blood in the water. "Alpha, we have a catastrophic situation," Beta Garrett announced, bursting into Kit's office without knocking. He slammed a leather folder onto the mahogany desk. "It's the Blackwood Pack. Reese Sterling isn't just challenging our borders. He's orchestrating a hostile takeover of Lockwood Enterprises." Kit barely blinked, his amber eyes sunken and rimmed with exhausted purple shadows. Sienna's family backing him? Worse, Garrett grimaced. Reese has leveraged Sienna's Beta lineage assets and partnered with a human private military contractor. We've tracked wire transfers from shell companies tied to Constellus and heavily backed by asset managers at BlackRock. They aren't just trying to outmaneuver us in the boardroom, Kit. They are buying the land rights to the silver mines beneath our territory. If they get the human government involved under the guise of eminent domain, they can deploy PMC mercenaries equipped with silver nitrate weaponry. Reese wants to wipe the silver pine off the map entirely. Kit let out a hollow, bitter laugh. Sienna had thought she was manipulating Kit to become a Luna of a stronger pack. Instead, Reese was using her as a pawn to commit pack genocide. "Gather the enforcers," Kit rasped, his voice lacking its usual thunderous command. "Prepare for a siege." "You need her," his inner wolf whimpered, a pathetic, dying sound in his mind. "Find the true Luna." Meanwhile, deep within the ancient, misty crags of Mount Hood, Genevieve was no longer the timid girl who dropped catering trays. The venom Kit had injected into her neck had been the key to unlocking a millennia-old genetic vault. The first Lunas were not mere mates to alphas. They were the conduits of the Earth Goddess herself. They were the origin of the shifter magic, holding absolute dominion over the elements and the minds of wolves. Evie stood barefoot in the snow, wearing nothing but a simple white cotton dress she had stolen from a clothesline on the edge of the human towns. Despite the freezing temperatures, she felt no cold. Her skin hummed with a radiant internal heat. "They are coming, Genevieve," a voice whispered in the wind, rustling the towering pine trees. It was the collective consciousness of her ancestors, awake and thriving in her blood. She closed her eyes, casting her senses outward. Her mind expanded like a vast, invisible net over the state of Oregon. She could feel the heartbeat of every deer, the flow of the Columbia River, and she felt him, Kit, through the jagged, painful tear of their bond. She felt his despair. She felt his physical deterioration. But more intensely, she felt the impending slaughter of the pack that had shunned her. The Silver Pine wolves had been cruel to her, treating her like dirt because of her Omega status, but they were still her people. Suddenly, the tranquil silence of the mountain was shattered by the rhythmic, heavy thudding of military-grade helicopter rotors. Evie's quicksilver eyes snapped open. The invasion had begun. The attack on the Lockwood estate began not with tradition, but with calculated destruction. As twilight settled over the Oregon Cascades, tear gas and smoke grenades shattered the grand windows, signaling the start of a merciless assault. Reese Sterling had abandoned all notions of honor. Driven by greed, he sought not only control of Kit Lockwood's territory but also the valuable silver mines beneath it, and he came prepared for total annihilation. Black Hawk helicopters descended, deploying heavily armed mercenaries clad in advanced tactical gear. Their weapons were loaded with silver nitrate rounds, specifically designed to cripple a werewolf's healing abilities. Leading them was Reese himself, transformed into a massive black dire wolf, with Sienna Frost at his side, her ambition quickly turning to horror as the violence unfolded. The estate became a battlefield. Kit, alongside his beta Garrett and his brother Caleb, fought with desperate intensity. Despite his strength, the odds were overwhelming. For every enemy he struck down, more advanced, firing relentlessly. The air filled with gunfire, smoke, and blood. Then disaster struck. A sniper's shot hit Caleb, forcing him back into human form, gravely wounded. Kit rushed to shield him, but the moment of distraction cost him. Reese attacked, slamming him to the ground and pinning him beneath his weight. Shifting back to human form, Reese raised a silver blade, ready to deliver the final blow. Sienna screamed for him to stop, realizing too late the scale of betrayal. But Reese dismissed her, declaring there would be no surrender, only destruction. Just as the blade descended, everything changed. The temperature plummeted, frost spreading instantly across the battlefield. The helicopters above faltered and crashed as if struck by an unseen force. Darkness fell, suffocating and absolute. And for the first time that night, everyone, human and wolf alike, stood frozen in fear. Out of the burning tree line walked Genevieve Lawson. She did not run. She did not rush. She glided with the terrifying, deliberate grace of a monarch descending upon a den of thieves. Her bare feet didn't even seem to touch the blood-soaked earth. She was still wearing the simple, stolen white cotton dress, but it billowed around her as if caught in a localized phantom wind. The brutal bite mark on her neck, the scar of Kit's greatest mistake, was now a beacon of blinding, luminescent silver light. Behind her, the forest itself seemed to exhale. Emerging from the misty darkness were hundreds of massive timber wolves. They were rogues, forgotten ancients, and wild beasts that had belonged to no pack for centuries. They flanked Genevieve in absolute silence, their eyes glowing with the exact same quicksilver light as hers. They moved in perfect, terrifying unison, waiting for a single command. Enough. Genevieve spoke a single word. She did not shout, yet the sound echoed with the devastating physical force of a sonic boom, vibrating in the marrow of every living creature present. In the hands of the human mercenaries, the advanced weaponry instantly failed. The high-grade steel and polymer of their assault rifles rapidly oxidized, rusting and degrading into fine orange dust in a matter of seconds. The men screamed in sheer, unadulterated terror, dropping their useless, crumbling weapons and stumbling backward. Rhys froze, the silver hunting knife in his hand suddenly superheating. The metal turned to scorching, molten liquid, burning straight through his palm. He dropped it with a shrieking howl of agony, spinning around to face the source of the interruption. "Kill her!" Rhys screamed, clutching his ruined hand, spit flying from his lips as he directed his remaining blackwood wolves. "Tear that Omega to pieces!" Not a single wolf moved. They were completely paralyzed by the overwhelming, crushing aura of the true Luna. Genevieve stepped forward, her quicksilver gaze locking onto Rhys. She didn't raise a hand. She didn't use physical force. She simply pushed her internal gravity outward. It was the undeniable pull of the moon herself, heavy, ancient, and absolute. Rhys's knees violently buckled beneath him. His bones cracked audibly in the suffocating silence as he was forced downward. He tried to fight it, his eyes bulging wildly, blood vessels popping across his forehead and cheeks from the sheer, agonizing effort of resisting her command. But it was entirely futile. With a sickening wet crunch, his face was forced straight into the frozen dirt at Genevieve's bare feet. "You dare bring human weapons and human greed to slaughter our kind." Genevieve's dual-layered voice vibrated through the bedrock of the earth, echoing with the furious timbre of 1,000 forgotten matriarchs. "You dare attempt to usurp the sacred laws for profit? I am an Alpha." Rhys choked out, blood spilling from his lips as he gasped for air under the crushing psychic weight. "You are nothing," Genevieve whispered coldly. She reached down, gracefully extending a single, delicate finger to touch the back of his neck. With a swift, merciless pulse of pure silver energy, she severed the spiritual tether within him. Rhys let out a high-pitched, entirely human scream of absolute agony as his inner beast was violently ripped from his soul. In the blink of an eye, the Alpha of the Blackwood Pack was rendered a powerless, mundane human. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed into the dirt, completely unconscious. The battlefield fell dead silent, save for the crackling of the downed helicopters burning in the distance. The Aegis mercenaries, realizing they were facing something bordering on a deity, broke their ranks. They turned and fled blindly into the dark woods, abandoning their mission, their gear, and their pride. Sienna Frost fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Her platinum hair was in ruins, her expensive coat stained with mud. She bowed her head so low it touched the frost-covered grass, shivering uncontrollably. Genevieve walked past the traitorous woman without offering her a single, fleeting glance of acknowledgement. She stopped in front of Kit. The Alpha was battered, his body bleeding freely from a dozen toxic silver wounds, his auburn hair matted with dirt and ash. He looked up at the woman he had treated as a disposable, worthless pawn. He looked at the woman he had violently, selfishly marked in a fit of arrogant rage. As he stared into the swirling galaxies of her quicksilver eyes, he finally understood the magnitude of his foolishness. Kit didn't try to stand. He stayed firmly on his knees, slowly, painfully fighting through the agonizing burn of the silver in his veins. He tilted his head to the side, exposing his thick neck and his vulnerable scent gland to her. It was the ultimate, undeniable act of submission. An Alpha willingly surrendering his supreme title, his life, and his entire pack to the victor. "I was wrong," Kit whispered, his voice cracking with genuine, devastating remorse. Tears mixed with the dirt on his bruised face. I was a fool, blinded by my own fragile pride. I deserve death, Genevieve. I accept my fate. But please, I beg you, spare my brother. Spare what is left of my pack. Genevieve looked down at him. The raging, poisoned venom of the forced bond still pulsed jaggedly between them, a dark tether waiting to be severed. She held absolute power now. She could stop his heart with a single, fleeting thought. Instead, the Empress of the Woods slowly knelt in the ruined grass before him. She lifted her cool, glowing hands and placed them gently on either side of his battered face. "The era of arrogant kings and petty tyrants is over, Kit," she said softly. The terrifying, booming dual layer had left her voice, replaced by a profound, ancient sorrow and a deep, grounding wisdom. The silver pine does not need a dictator. It needs a guardian. She leaned forward, her silver hair brushing against his shoulder, and pressed her lips gently against the jagged, forced bite mark she had left on his soul through their chaotic tether. A massive surge of pure, cleansing silver light rushed from her lips, pouring directly into his bloodstream. It acted as divine fire, instantly purging the toxic silver nitrate from his veins, knitting his torn muscles back together and healing his deep physical wounds in a matter of seconds. Kit let out a shuddering gasp. The suffocating decay and the crushing weight in his chest vanished entirely, replaced by a profound, grounding peace and clarity he had never experienced in his life. "Rise, Kit Lockwood," Genevieve commanded, standing up tall and sweeping her gaze out over the hundreds of kneeling wolves, the surviving silver pine, the terrified blackwood, and the ancient rogues alike. "Stand not as my master, not as my alpha, but as my beta." Kit stood up, his strength fully restored, and bowed his head deeply in absolute reverence. "Yes, my Luna." Genevieve looked up at the blood moon, which hung heavy and crimson in the night sky. She had spent her entire life as the weakest, most discarded creature in their hidden world. But as the newly united packs raised their heads and howled their absolute, unwavering devotion into the crisp night air, tearing the heavens apart with their triumphant song, one universal truth was solidified. She was no longer the wrong Omega. She was the one and only Luna. Did Genevieve's terrifying transformation leave you utterly speechless? Or do you think Kit deserved a far worse punishment for his arrogant betrayal? The dynamics of power, vengeance, and ancient bloodlines never fail to deliver jaw-dropping twists. If you loved this intense werewolf drama, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your fellow romance fantasy addicts, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories.